My name is Eric Wallen, and tonight I'd like to talk to you about judgment. So first and foremost, this is me as a kid, adorable, I know, and I'm waiting to go to summer camp, waiting for the bus. So I've got my bug net, I've got my sun hat, I'm even wearing a little junior park ranger badge, which you can just barely see peeking out of the bottom of the photo there. And while this picture makes it obvious that I have always been a bit of a nature nerd, it's also maybe a little bit confusing because it's a picture of a girl. And that's because when I was born female, at least physically. So this is me on the left as a child, as I just described, and this is me now on the right. This particular photo was taken shortly after finishing a running race, but also after years of receiving gender-affirming care. Now, it's highly unlikely that if you just saw these images on social media that you would draw the connection between the two, that they are in fact the same person, especially without the context that I just provided. In fact, what your brain is tempted to do is this: female on the left, male on the right. But this makes it difficult for you to then realize that the two are the same person. So why is this? Why do we inherently put things, including people, into categories that streamline our interpretation of them, often to a fault? Some of it is simply the way our brains are wired. We judge people based on facial characteristics alone, within milliseconds of meeting them for the first time. These judgments can even be so powerful that they can predict the outcomes of elections if one candidate appears to look more competent, or even more symmetrical or attractive than others. And this near instantaneous forming of an opinion is also known as snap judgment. And this is your brain on social media. In the past 150 years, technological advances have taken us from the first key-driven calculators all the way to the invention of the home internet and computers to the tiny computers that we now carry in our pockets. As this technology has progressed, so too has our ability to connect with and communicate with one another. We now have more information at our fingertips than any other time in history. And the primary way that we consume this information is through social media. But how much is too much? Since the rise of social media, researchers have demonstrated countless ways in which social media use impacts the human brain and our ability to process information. We know that it can reduce and divide our attention span, limiting our comprehension, our productivity, and our memory. Our incredible exposure to digital devices can lead to reduced gray matter and density in parts of the brain associated with impulse control and decision-making. Greater screen time in children can lead to lower cortical thickness in areas of the brain that influence literacy and language skills. In college students specifically, heavy Facebook users have significantly lower GPAs than students who spend less time on the platform. Even the presence of a smartphone, regardless of whether or not you're using it, reduces your cognitive capacity or your ability to process information. Collectively, these impacts make it difficult for us to engage in critical thinking. So it's not really a surprise that when your brain is faced with a new piece of complex information, that it wants to simplify it. Not only is this the way that social media platforms are designed for brevity and quick emotional reactions, but it's also a function of what they're doing to our brains in the long term. But the thing is that snap judgment doesn't just impact one issue or one group of people. Odds are that many of us have felt judged on a social media platform at some point in our lives. That something we've said has been misinterpreted. That something we believe, or even how we look, has been used to put us in a category that we may or may not belong in. And ultimately, these judgments are the result of information overload, of living in a world where perception is reality because we don't have the capacity for it to be anything else. But the issue here is that we're not just judging content. We're judging people. We're judging each other. In the same way that technological innovations can have positive impacts on the global scale, they can also scale up in a negative way. These judgments can even lead to the dehumanization of entire groups of people, of entire countries. Ultimately, they can lead to violence and death. This is particularly true for transgender people like myself. So how do we fix this? What do we do? What we cannot do is rely on the same social media platforms that allow misinformation to be perpetuated to solve the problem. In fact, we could even argue that they are strongly incentivized to continue to overload us with information and to compromise our impulse control and our decision-making. In 2024 alone, Facebook generated over $131 billion in advertising revenue, with the prices of those advertisements increasing based on the number of clicks that they receive from users. So the beneficiaries of this strategy will not be the ones to remedy it. Instead, we have to take collective global action to engage in critical thinking when we're evaluating new pieces of information. Now, we're tired, we're stressed out, we're burned out, we're busy, but we're also human. And that humanity is not something that we want to lose as technology progresses. That humanity should motivate us to evaluate how we allow our relationships with technology to influence our relationships with one another. So what I propose is a simple strategy, but it does take practice. When you first receive a new piece of information, say a new post or a new reel on social media, I first want you to stop. Allow your brain to make the snap judgments that it is inherently wired to make. Maybe you see a photo of someone and it says to you, this person looks untrustworthy. After that initial stop phase, I want you to think. Think about what you already know or don't know about the topic. Does the information that you're receiving conflict with what you already know? Do you even have enough information to make a judgment at all? And it's important to also make space for us to reflect. Reflect on our beliefs, our values, our morals, our ethics. Do we really believe that someone is less than simply because they appear to fit into a certain category? How would we address the issue if we were in person rather than on the other end of a phone or behind a keyboard? And finally, once we've acknowledged our pre-existing beliefs and our biases, which are typically revealed to us in that first stop phase, and once we've reconciled that with what we believe and what we know about the topic, then we are in a position to react. And I think it's important to point out here that having no response at all, either by not commenting on or liking something, or not choosing to share it with others, is also a valid form of reacting. Because the rate at which misinformation travels only differs from the rate at which accurate information travels by the number of people who are willing to pass it along without further investigation or evaluation. So the next time you're faced with a new piece of information, the next time you open your phone, log on to social media, I challenge you to take a moment to stop, think, reflect, and then react. And I know that this won't be an instantaneous change for most of us. It'll take time and it'll take practice. But if you struggle to slow down and work through this process, then I would urge you to consider this. What do you really lose by taking the time to critically evaluate your judgments before you share them with the world? Likely far less than you stand to gain. See, my hope is this, that rather than oversimplifying and making a snap, quite possibly false judgment, we take the time to slow down and see the full picture, because we all deserve to be fully seen, including you. Thank you.